is A&B Combos Wrestling Edition. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to fumble, because I don't think I can say rumble because it might be choppy, right? I don't know, so we might fumble the ball.
Well, can we not predict a fumble?
Then rumble! Welcome to the most must-see wrestling review and live reaction podcast in all the land. I'm talking about A&B Combos Wrestling Edition podcast. With us, as always, is the one and only wrestling historian, the man that knows more about professional wrestling than anyone in history. Fight me if you want to. I'm talking about Steven Sandridge.
Send all protests and complaints to AJ at A&B Wrestling Combos.
Just bring it.
Bring it, baby.
I'm telling you right now, man. You think you know, and then Steven comes on here and says, let me drop some wrestling gospel on you. There we go.
Yeah.
Save the other gospel for Sundays.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, it's funny because I've noticed that whenever we're in a chat or in anything, if I'm like, oh yeah, I can't remember, but he'll remember like everything about it, like where it took place, who was a part of it,
That's impressive.
what was going on at that time. I'm like, geez, man, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast.
I'm definitely that guy when our family's watching a movie and my wife is like, "What movie was that guy?" Oh, just hold on, I'll get it.
He is the IMDb.
Yeah, walking IMDb.
Which, by the way, I mentioned this. We filmed our Friday night SmackDown Live, and I mentioned in the chat that I wanted to discuss some a Marvel thing. I think I brought it up briefly before, but this goes back to Superman 78. It was on actually last night.
Nice.
It was on last night, and I don't know why they're bringing up the old Supermans, because I was stuck on Superman 3 the other day, and shout out to Christopher Reeve, rest in peace, because I just did not. Well, you know what? It was a solid film, but I don't want to get off topic. I'm just simply saying.
Did we ever get on topic?
Right.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe, DC, all of that, it ties into professional wrestling, but I will turn this over to B. Go ahead. I digress.
Okay, well, that's not going to lead into my question. I appreciate the comment. But no, actually, I do want to say that in a world where people are constantly like, you still watch wrestling and, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of those same people do watch DC or Marvel or Star Wars, right? And it's like, where else do you have live action superheroes and villains that can perform for you and give you that same kind of feeling that you get when you're watching these comic book come to life movies and shows? And
you go to like Disneyland, you see grown people dressed up,
right? And when we were at Disneyland, you could see grown people with no kids there with Disney tattoos, Disney whatever.
Kids, baby.
Same thing.
I've seen more women fawn over Gaston than Roman Reigns, so I don't.
But we get chastised for wearing a professional wrestling belt to a show. Come on,
right.
Come on.
So anyway,
it's like wearing Mickey ears.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Sheesh.
Yes. So with podcast number 8, here we are. Podcast number 8, and I wanted to talk a little bit because we didn't really get a chance to get into it that much about WWE post Vince. So we did the whole series, the whole documentary about Mr. McMahon, and now we are post Mr. McMahon, and we have a new WWE under Paul Levesque. And I just wonder, with his creative vision, how do you see his direction differing from Vince McMahon's direction that has just made such a positive impact? What do you think is the big difference between these two leaders?
I think it almost depends if you want to focus on what's on screen and what's off screen. The industry itself has evolved a lot, and Vince, ironically enough, he outlasted a lot of his competition because he was willing to evolve with times and they weren't. And but Vince wasn't really willing to evolve in ways that were like pro-employee. And I mean, that might be a bit of a generalization, but a couple of things I think are really good. It's interesting. Like on screen, I'd say Triple H is actually doing a good job of revering the history of wrestling, which Vince never really wanted to do unless it was history that he currently had under contract.
Right.
Like he, if you didn't get famous under his supervision and you weren't currently still making him money, he wasn't going to reference you on TV. And Hunter will just to tell it like it is to a degree. I mean, but even currently they show video packages and stuff, and sometimes there's like little subtle digs. But they did like the New Day thing recently, and they showed. They showed in the celebration portion of it, everything New Day had done. They'd shown video clips that Moxley was in, that Daniel Bryan was in, that Jericho might have been in, and stuff, and all this stuff because it helped the creation. It helped the ambience of what they were trying to do, and instead of giving you some random top 10 list that. Right. No disrespect to him, but that Roman Reigns takes 6 spots of because he's the guy in their company right now. Right. And YouTube's top 10 thing that they would do like every week was always fun to watch, but then I got like really agitated with it. And it was like top 10 Intercontinental title wins, and I'm like, The Miz is not number 1 just because he's under contract right now. Stuff like that. But then like off camera, right? They have taken the health and well-being of their staff a lot more seriously in their activities. Like even I wouldn't say to the detriment, but even to the inconvenience of the fans, because like they don't do as many live shows anymore. They're taping shows during holidays. So like Thanksgiving, and we'll see at the end of the year and Christmas and stuff, you'll see Raws and SmackDowns that are already taped because they're giving them time off. Right. So that's, to the betterment of people, and also not just not having events, and they're finding ways to make money elsewhere without having to do it off the backs of their talent all the time, is they're also just giving talent time off because they recognize the depth of their roster, and they're actually like building more stars like they did when the pressure was on them to have to build more stars. So like you get people like a Bronson Reed, get well soon, man. The people like him coming up to the main event because you get people like Randy Orton who take time off, right, or whatever, whether they need it or not. And so, and that also helps keep people. I'll pick on Randy for a second because he's been with the company for almost 25 years. Easy. And without taking a break to go anywhere else either, is that like people, talent won't get oversaturated and they won't lose their luster a little bit. You won't be taking them for granted if they're gone for a while and come back and stuff. And so, it freshens them up a little bit when they return, which is a great thing, both for the health of the performer and for the perception of the fan when they get that little return pop.
I got to tell you, I've thought about that question even before you asked that question for a while, looking at the landscape, looking at where things are in the WWE. I mean, it's interesting because there's one school of thought for me where going back in the day, like we had said, there were guys that were on the road 300 plus, period. You just worked. You just worked and worked and worked. And there was something to be said for that, in that I never really felt like I got tired of seeing anybody necessarily back in the day, but also realizing that was to the performer's detriment, getting tired, getting hooked on prescription drugs, getting, partying like you're on the road, you're away from your family. There was pros and cons to it, maybe a little more con than pros. And now it's a little different. We have people that are taking time off. Like you said, not oversaturated. There's a part of me that does appreciate that. There's also part of me that I don't love it, only because it's like, for example, Charlotte Flair. I'm sure she's healthy right now, physically healthy. I think she's able to compete. I think she's able to return. Yet we've not seen her. What has it been? A year now? Yeah, we're coming up on a year?
Probably close to that.
Right? And so then you just kind of drop them. Becky Lynch is taking time off. She's perfectly healthy. She said herself, I don't know when I'm going to return. I'm working on some other stuff right now. And that's the thing that I kind of get bummed at as a fan, is that people now feel they're more of a brand than a wrestler. And that I have issue with, because they don't want to get hurt. Now, I don't mean hurt like Bronson Reed, broken foot, Jimmy Uso broken toe. Like, I don't mean like that. Like Joey Mercury, face explosion hurt. But I mean, they don't like, look, I'm doing other things right now. Let's just come in here, put on a good show, and let's collect my bag and let's move on so I can do my other stuff. And that I have issue with. I want to make sure that when people lace them up, they understand that you're not a brand. You are that professional wrestler. You are that character. I expect you to perform as such. I've said this 1,000,001 different times. As a professional wrestler, you've got one job. As a professional wrestling company, you have one job: to make us believe that what we're watching is legit. That's it. That's it. However way you got to do it, just make sure you do it. And when I see people like Elektra Lopez, for example, I'm a big fan. I'm high on her, but she was wrestling pretty consistently in NXT. But as we've seen what happens when you don't wrestle consistently, you get that thing called ring rust. And you get into the ring and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, this is awkward looking match. And it's
sorry,
just...
she was great in NXT at some point?
Okay, I'm not saying she was great.
Oh.
What I'm saying, it's like Booker T. You're not great at anything. You're good at everything, man. I like it, man. Okay, so what I'm saying is ring rust is a real thing. And I want to make sure people are, when they're off, that they are keeping their skills sharp in the ring so that when they do get back into the ring, they don't miss a beat.
This is also the downside to not wrestling 300 times a year.
Yeah.
Because it's, to hear a lot of the guys talk about it, and ladies, it's something you have to do a lot to train your body to not get hurt with it, which seems so backwards, but like you kind of have to callous yourself.
Yeah, you've got to do that. Exactly.
Do that. And I don't mind. I don't mind performers branding themselves because, like any pro athlete, you can only do the activity for so long in your life, and then what? And a lot of these people, at least prior to now, and the whole developmental people and stuff, don't have like college degrees and stuff like that. And so I don't mind them doing that outside of the performance, but I do agree with you inside of the performance. Like, let's be careful how many business decisions you're making in the ring and when you're cutting promos about protecting your brand.
Thank you.
That's a little Hoganish.
Little Hoganish. Yes, ma'am.
AJ doesn't really like wrestlers to have a life outside of wrestling. He just doesn't.
Uh-oh.
He really thinks, I'm telling you,
coming in hot.
He thinks that if you're a wrestler, your whole world should be wrestling. You do.
I'm not saying to the point where you got to be a Ric Flair, woo, and you're wrestling at 95. You don't got to be a Mae Young being put through a table. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, but like people take time off to like have kids. Like Becky Lynch has a baby. See, he's like, no, forget life. You're a wrestler. You don't get a life.
It's if I'm Tony Khan,
how many
in the contract?
How many second, third, and fourth generation people wouldn't be here if their parents and grandparents abided by that philosophy?
Look, if you're injured and you're hurt and you're out,
then
that's
have a
one
baby
thing.
while you're out.
If you're actively on the roster,
Bob Orton with that cast on his arm.
I'm sorry.
Hadn't found the love of his life.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be talking about the apex predator today.
Exactly.
Chastity belts is what need to be worn. Okay.
Well, some of them do for real, but that's a whole nother podcast.